Look, I was wrong. These 5 wide receivers, I faded them, doubted them, maybe even slandered them in a video or two. But now, I'm drafting them like my season depends on it, because honestly, it just might. These are the 5 wide receivers I was 100% wrong about, but now I'm all in. Let's start with T-Mac. That's the rookie wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, who I cannot call Tet, but I also cannot pronounce his first name. So from here on out, I'm going to call him T-Mac. Anyways, when T-Mac was drafted by the Panthers, I didn't really love the landing spot. But the more I dive into it, the more I've come around on it. And now I'm drafting this guy every chance I can in my fantasy drafts in like round 5, round 6. Because not only did Bryce Young show growth last year down the stretch, but when you look at what Bryce Young was very good at last year, and even going back into college, it meshes perfectly with McMillan's skill set. There were 3 areas Bryce Young really showed on tape that he excelled at last year. That was number 1, throws across the middle. Number 2, those back shoulder throws. And number 3, I call them scramble drills. That's plays where the pocket breaks down and the quarterback is on the move. He showed over and over again his ability to buy time with his mobility and still make accurate throws. Now you look at McMillan, his last year in college. What did he show on tape? Number 1, had one of the highest success rates among all prospects on the dig route, that in-breaking route. That's going to mesh perfectly with Bryce Young. Number 2, you see over and over again, he's working those back shoulder throws. And number 3, what I really love, you see again, over and over again, when his quarterback gets out of the pocket and buys time when the pocket breaks down, McMillan just understands where to be, where to sit in that soft spot and get open for his quarterback. I think he's a match made in heaven for Bryce Young. Not to mention that, look at his competition for targets here in Carolina. We got Xavier Legette, who's fine, but he's not a target hog here. We got Jalen Coker. Hey, Cokeheads unite, but let's be real. Jalen Coker's not a wide receiver 1. And then you got old man Adam Thielen, and look, to his credit, he's still chugging along, but are we really going to build an offense around Adam Thielen? I don't think so. Dave Canales is going to build this offense around Ted McMillan, T-Mac, and that's going to be great for his fantasy value right away in year 1. And if Bryce Young even gets a little bit better going into year 3 now, McMillan could absolutely explode as a rookie. Maybe not quite to the level that we saw with a BTJ or even a Ladd McConkey or maybe even a Neighbors, but anything close to that where you're drafting him, he's going to be an absolute steal. I keep drafting this guy over and over in my best ball drafts as my wide receiver 3, sometimes my wide receiver 4. I think he's an absolute steal, and I think he's going to absolutely smash with Bryce Young in this offense. Now, for most of the offseason, I was 100% out on George Pickens. I didn't want to hear any talk about Steelers, athleticism, the only man in town to catch passes. Nah, it didn't matter. It didn't matter last year. Wasn't going to matter this year. But then something happened. He got traded to the Cowboys, which is a massive upgrade for his fantasy value, but something else happened. His ADP hasn't really reflected this. He's barely going as a top 50 pick as a wide receiver 28 in fantasy drafts right now. This is crazy to me because he's going from a team that last year ranked 28th in pass play percentage to a team that the last 2 years has been 11th and 6th in pass play percentage. Not only that, the Cowboys have led the league each of the last 2 years in expected fantasy points for wide receivers and the most fantasy points scored by wide receivers. This is a fantastic situation for George Pickens. Not to mention he's going from Russell Wilson and whatever other terrible quarterbacks, Justin Fields, whoever they had last year, to Dak Prescott. And whatever you think about Dak Prescott, yeah, he can't win the big game, but he can support fantasy goodness and fantasy wide receivers. What's also going to help him is he now gets to play alongside a true elite wide receiver, which means teams can't just double George Pickens and take him out of the play. And if somehow all of that isn't enough for you, how about this? The Cowboys and the new offensive coordinator already talking about moving them around the formation more and letting them run a more diverse route tree, not just all those deep routes. Look, we know he can run the deep routes. We know he's one of the best contested catch players in the game. But I've talked about it on previous videos. If this guy starts running more routes, and especially they start using him on those slant routes where he can get the ball in space and use his athleticism and his yard after catch ability, George Pickens could absolutely explode in this Cowboys offense. This is far and away the best situation he has ever been in his entire career, and drafters don't seem to be reacting to it as much as they should be. Look, if George Pickens cannot have the best season, by far the best season of his career this year in Dallas, maybe he's just going to be one of those guys that's all hype, no substance, but I believe the substance will be there this year. I am drafting George Pickens every time I can when he falls in that range, again, around pick 50 as the wide receiver 28. If you're itching to draft fantasy teams right now, don't wait. Underdog Fantasy has live drafts running all offseason with fun, unique formats, including their flagship Best Ball Mania 6, which will make multiple millionaires in 2025. Plus, pick'ems are already live for week 1. Just head to UnderdogFantasy.com, sign up with promo code ENDGAME, and they'll match your deposit up to $1,000 in bonus funds, plus toss in a free gimme pick. Now, if you watch my earlier videos this offseason, I was all in on Ricky Pearsall and wasn't really talking up Juwan Jennings, but a strange thing happened. Pearsall had a hamstring injury that kind of held him out of OTAs in minicamp, and word was, don't worry, he's going to be fine. He'll be out there for training camp. But then what happens? He gets put on the PUP list. Now, I will say, Shanahan saying it's not going to be a long stint on the PUP list, and look, maybe by the time you're watching this video, he's back out there practicing. But the fact that he's already dealing with a hamstring injury and missing time just opens up the door even more for Juwan Jennings, a door that was already pretty wide open for Jennings because Brandon Ayuk, it doesn't sound like is anywhere close to being back. We're looking at maybe week 4 at the absolute earliest, more likely week 6, who knows? And then even when he does come back, you know they got to ramp him up slowly after having no training camp coming off an injury. This is going to open the door to Juwan Jennings being the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco. And last year in the 9 games where he played at least 75% of the snaps, he was a top 7 fantasy wide receiver in 4 of those games. He averaged 8.7 targets per game, which would have been a 150 target pace over a 17-game season. And when you just look at wide receivers in terms of when they were on the field, he was 7th among all wide receivers in target share last year. Now he's going to get a full season essentially as the wide receiver 1 in a Kyle Shanahan offense. You want the wide receiver 1 in a Kyle Shanahan offense, and Juwan Jennings showed last year he's got what it takes to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. With Debo gone, with Pearsall repeatedly banged up, and with Brandon Ayuk coming off a major injury, it's not hard to envision Juwan Jennings being the clear target leader in this offense. You want the guy getting the most targets in a Shanahan offense. I think that's going to be Juwan Jennings this year. And right now in drafts, he's going around pick 63, which is just all the risk pretty much baked out of this pick, but none of the upside baked into it. He's got the kind of upside that can win you weeks by himself. Yes, he may be volatile, but as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 flex, it's okay to have that volatility. I'm starting to love Juwan Jennings in my fantasy drafts. Now, I generally try to fade players coming off of ACL because, as we've seen with like the Brandon Ayuk's type, it generally doesn't work out in year 1. But I'm actually doing the opposite when it comes to Stefon Diggs, who somehow, not only did he not get placed on the PUP list to start training camp, he was a full participant from day 1. And Mike Vrabel saying, no limitations on this guy. This is amazing. I don't know what he did on that boat. I don't know what was in those little baggies, but whatever it was, it worked because here we are. Stefon Diggs looks full go for week 1 and the rest of the season. Now, obviously, we're not getting prime Stefon Diggs here, and this is the Patriots offense with Drake May, not the Bills offense with Josh Allen. But still, this guy even showed last year, if put in the right role in the right situation, he can still be a productive wide receiver. And when you look at the Patriots pass catchers outside of Stefon Diggs, yeah, Kyle Williams, I like him, but he's a rookie. He's going to need time. Pop Douglas, fine as a slot wide receiver. There's really nobody here. Stefon Diggs should definitely be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. And Drake May showed enough as a rookie. If he takes a step in year 2, he can support Stefon Diggs. Now, unlike Juwan Jennings, I view Diggs more as a floor play than a ceiling play because, again, what's the ceiling in this offense? It's probably going to be a slow offense. They're going to lean on the defense. They're going to run the football a lot. But still, in your redraft leagues, having that floor is sometimes a nice thing. If you know a guy's going to get you points and not kill you, that's a nice thing, especially when we're talking about a guy who's probably going to be your flex position or maybe your wide receiver 3. Because he's currently going off the board at pick 78 as the wide receiver 43. I don't see any reason Stefon Diggs doesn't absolutely smash this ADP unless, of course, he re-injures his knee, in which case he's going to give you a 0 the rest of the year, but that's fine. You drop him, you move on. I'm taking shots on a healthy Stefon Diggs. No, he doesn't have the ceiling he had back in his prime, but he gives you a very high weekly floor. He'll score some touchdowns, and the target volume should be enough to make him a smash at this pick. And then finally, a guy I flip-flopped on a couple times this year is Christian Kirk. After free agency, I loved his landing spot in Houston as that slot wide receiver, kind of taking over that Stefon Diggs role. Then what happened in the NFL draft? The Texans went out and drafted not 1, but 2 rookie wide receivers. But now we're entering camp and we're hearing great things about Christian Kirk, not just like as a player, but how they're going to use Christian Kirk. Number one, it sounds like he's clearly ahead of Jalen Noel in that slot role. But number two, what I really love is it sounds like they're not just viewing him as a slot player. They want to move him around the formation, get him reps on the outside in that flanker role. And that means more snaps at 2 wide receiver sets. He's not just going to be a guy out there like a Jaden Reed, who's only out there when they're in 3 wide receiver sets. He'll get plenty of run in 2 wide receiver sets, and I love the fact that they're going to move him around the formation, get him in motion. That is great for him. Even when you look at it, Stephon Diggs last year, if he's in that same role, was on a nice pace, was averaging over 15 points per game before his ACL injury. And it's not like Christian Kirk is a bad player. He's just been also injury prone, missed a ton of games recently. But the last time we saw this guy play a full season in Jacksonville, over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. If you get anything close to that this year, you're going to love this pick because he's currently going off the board at pick 124, wide receiver 58. This is just absolutely a crime. He's just completely forgotten in fantasy drafts. I'm taking this guy over and over again late in my fantasy drafts, and I think you need to do it too. I think he's going to be a great flex play with weekly upside that you got basically for free. So there it is, the 5 wide receivers I was 100% wrong about earlier this offseason, but now I'm drafting over and over again. But look, you need to know way more than this if you're going to win in 2025. Don't worry, we got you covered. Our playlist with all the videos you need to dominate, you can find it right here.